wherever you're joining us from the wonderful Northeast down to the sunny coast of Southern California. We are Life and In Between Podcast, and welcome to 2026. Did you stuff all those extra toys into your closets? Did you survive time with your family? Are you going back to work and maybe wondering, what have I done? How am I still here? Well, you're in the right place because we have an amazing guest today who's going to kind of walk us through the different rhythms of culture at work, families, friends, wherever we go. We're with you. Please help me welcome your wonderful host, Deanna.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us at Life and In Between. Today, I am so excited to introduce someone that I had the pleasure of meeting in one of my past lives careers. He is phenomenal, fantastic. His name is Colin Mincy, and he is recognized as a top 40 chief human resource officer and a global people culture leader. But I'm not going to steal his thunder because I want him to kind of fill us in, tell us everything about himself, more things that you know, I want him to tell and his journey. So, Colin, thank you so much for being a guest on Life and In Between.
Whoop, whoop.
It's really good to be here and Happy New Year to you both. I hope that 2026 brings you all of the desires of your heart. And congratulations on Life and In Between. I am a listener, a viewer, listener, depending on whether I'm multitasking or not. And I'm really glad to be here and to have this conversation. I think we spend a third of our life at work. And so I thought it'd be really cool for us to kind of talk about life in that context um and how those things kind of manifest.
Thank you so much for that. Yes. So okay, there's so much to unpack. I mean, there is so much to unpack. So, um, why don't we go ahead and start talking like briefly about your journey, how you,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I'm an only child raised in New York, um middle class family and wanted, to grow up and to be a banker. And I'm
Oh,
not really sure
wow.
what that was about, but I remember as a young person some of my early experiences, on a Saturday or Sunday going to the local bank with one of my grandparents or one of my parents, and the relationship, I think, between, like the community and the bank. I think there was something about that experience that I always found really special. And so as a young person, I really wanted to be a banker. And that didn't quite work out. I started in banking and realized that it wasn't for me,
Mhm.
and found my career in HR. And so I've spent the last 22 years sort of in HR and in the people and culture section of work, which is where Diana and I first encountered one another. Um, and so I spend my career nurturing environments, supporting people, as many people who are in the HR and DEI realm do. But I also am a survivor of many of life's things that are challenging. So I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I had addiction issues when I was younger, sort of in college, and so a lot of my empathy and work around culture and the spaces in which people see me in my professional realm are actually driven by the fact that I understand a lot of the challenges and issues that people go through. Because even though we are leaders and even though we are healers, in professional settings, we're actually really human too.
Mm.
And so, as I watch, um, the number of HR leaders and DEI leaders burning out, and as I look at the complexity of asking, um, people who have been harmed to fix culture,
Mm.
I thought we should maybe take a moment and have a broader conversation about, um, how do we heal the healers?
That should be the title of the podcast, How to Heal the Healers. Because, yeah.
Wow, that is very powerful. I love that. And you're right, Patrick. That should be the title. So we're going to actually dive into that.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you, and it was something that you said a little bit earlier that kind of hit home, and it reminded me of a conversation I had a long time ago with someone. Um, they told me in the corporate world, especially in the corporate world scene, women are not meant to cry or show their emotions and show their pain. People
Hmm.
in general, and especially for men, I would say it's really more difficult for men to actually unpack those emotions. And if they do and they're seen vulnerable, it's stigmatized in a very negative way. And when you said, teaching healer, I'm sorry, the phrase, can you repeat that phrase, teaching healers?
How do we heal the healers?
How do we heal the
Yeah.
healers? Um, that reminded me when you said that of that conversation because uh, showing our emotions is part of healing.
Yes.
And it's so taboo. Why is that? I mean, can you give me,
I think that there is well, it's a layered question. Um, um, and by the way, I've heard that said before, right? I've heard that said before. Actually, I've worked in financial services, I've worked in tech, I've worked in philanthropy, I've worked in NGOs. I've actually heard, that framing before about crying at work being a sign or a signal of weakness, right? However you identify. Um, and I think that that's informed and born out of the expectation that when the workday starts, that life stops.
Mm.
And or that because we're in the workplace, we're the employee and not actually a human. And and so it's to me it's really the likening of saying, shut off all of the things that you care about and that occupy your mind and heart and be a robot for the day. And there are some people who are more comfortable in that environment and would be uncomfortable with someone being, overtly emotional or publicly emotional in the workplace. And then there are some people like me, I don't have a poker face and I do have a heart. And so every now and then might get impacted by something, you know, not being able to show my emotions would be really difficult. And so I think the solution is that we don't tell people how they should show up and that we honor and accept the person that shows up anyway. And when we don't understand it, we should seek to ask questions and satisfy our curiosities in ways that are safe and non-judgmental. Um, and we should consider and keep in mind that the way we show up might be different for someone else, and we should want the same grace for others as we would want for ourselves.
Mm.
love that. I can relate to what you just said because I'm an emotional person. You see everything on my face.
Right.
I have a tendency to cry through joy, sadness, everything. That's my thing. My go-to is crying.
Mhm.
And I know that makes people feel very uncomfortable. Um, how do we start having that conversation? How do we begin?
Um, it's hard to say. It's hard to answer that.
Right.
I think like if 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 there was a dynamic where I was in the room and someone was emotional, I think the worst thing to do is pretend that it's not happening,
Mm,
right? And I've been in situations in the room where someone's clearly having an issue and they're reacting and responding to something. And I think the worst thing you could do is just keep going and not acknowledge that someone either needs space or needs break or needs to say something or needs to get something out. And so I think the first thing is to, always acknowledge how people feel. Um, and to not normalize ignoring emotion.
mm,
Um, the second thing is that sometimes people need space, right? They don't want to be called out and they don't want to be put under the pressure of having to communicate while being upset. So maybe you take a break and you give people a couple of minutes to reset and you check on the individual and invite them to come back to the meeting. If that's too much, invite them to take some time away and then revisit with them later what in that conversation made them upset. Um, but do something is the answer to your question, Diana, right? And
don't ignore it or sweep it
you
under.
you you do something because um in order for us to cry, there was a trigger. And we don't want to re-trigger the individual. We want to understand what happened, what was in that dynamic, even if it has nothing to do with work. Even if the person's crying because they had to literally like negotiate like a UN officer to get their kid on the bus, like whatever it was that made them cry. We want to make sure that it wasn't informed and born by something that happened in the meeting or in the workplace. And if it's something that happened out of the workplace, we still want to know what it is because those things still impact people. And we're supposed to care about the whole person.
So good, yeah.
That is so good. That's a I'm taking it all in right now because what
Right.
you said is so powerful because it's actually changing the view of uh how we view people in the work setting. It's like, and it should be the way that you're saying they're human beings. They're like we
Mm.
are
Right.
human beings. And it's we're 2026 and we're still having this conversation. It's sad.
Because and I talk about this a lot, but we are having the same conversations across industry year after year. Um, we've hired consultants. We've um, we've done the Clifton Strengths. We've we've caught each other in those silly retreats. The trust falls. I said it. And um and the needle hasn't moved because there isn't like rigor and consistency and accountability around these things. There's good speeches, there are really great and innovative programs. We're giving out awards. We're putting kegs in offices and foosballs table. And I'm not criticizing those things. I'm suggesting that I think we have misdiagnosed what the barriers of culture are in the workplace. And they're the fact that people feel harm and they never get healed.
Mm,
And those feelings linger. And then they leave that workplace and they go to another workplace, still harmed from their prior experience. And it's a real vicious cycle. And it becomes HR's responsibility to fix, which is fine, but we're not going to fix things because we won't name them, right? And you can't claim things that you don't name. And so we're going to keep talking about it until we actually, I think, do some of the real meaningful work. What is the real meaningful work? It's like really doing pulse surveys um and listening sessions and giving employees at work spaces for feedback and making one-on-ones more than what did you do this week and more about how can I support you and where do you see yourself in this company in 2 or 3 years and are there opportunities that you're thinking about from a learning and development perspective that I can support you on. It's the foundation for my consultancy, which I call going beyond the work. Like, how do we as leaders show up for people beyond what it is we need from them? And the amount of trust and safety that is built when we go to that level of care and consideration. Because broken people don't get healed just because the workday begins.
Right. So true. Um, you said something, and I am so sorry, Patrick, if
Oh no, yeah, you're good.
you know, because
Keep going.
as you're saying this, I'm just unpacking all this. Um, you said that it begins with trust, and I think a lot of people in the workforce have this fear of HR. HR is like the fear, like the retaliation. They fear the, and of course, and they have this idea that HR protects the company, not the employee. And so there's that lack of trust there because they're like because they may have had a bad experience with a former employee that protected, you know, former HR department because they protected the company versus the employee. So I mean, like I think that's something that also needs to be addressed is how does an employee get past the biases that they have? Because not all HR is like that. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, you know.
No, you're not. Unfortunately, you're not wrong. Um, and um, I think the HR has the profession of HR has evolved. I think in its very traditional sense, it was an administrative function, very obviously connected to governance and very much about paperwork and documentation and structure. And I think it's become more weaved into strategic leadership in ways that I think are better. But um, there are there are problems in the relationship between HR and the worker. One of those problems is that we don't always have human-centered people in human resources.
Hmm.
And
Can you
my
explain that?
response to that is yeah. So what I mean by that very clearly is um I think that people know the difference between butter and margarine. And when someone goes to HR for support and help, they can tell by the way the person they are dealing with responds to them and their concerns, whether that person is really connected to caring for them and their problem.
There's empathy. There's
And the what what the opposite of that looks like is trying to resolve a problem that requires a conversation over email. Um Having that in-person meeting and engagement and the person really not paying attention or really actively listening to whatever it is that you are seeking to redress, or when they come to HR and they have an issue and before HR even acknowledges their experience they're defending, um you know the all of the behaviors that suggest you're here to cross me off the list. You're not really here to see and understand my experience. And that is the antithesis, I think, of the human-centered approach, which is that people want to be fully considered and seen and heard. And that requires a lot of time and a lot of engagement. And if you are not connected to those values, then the best you can do is show those things some of the time. Um, because if you're not connected to it, you're not going to do it consistently. And that is a problem that plagues HR.
Mm.
My solution to your conflict that you raised, Diana, is that um people should be able to go to anyone in leadership where they have an issue. Um, Particularly in environments where HR is either not empowered, which happens in a lot of places. HR wants to do something, but they structurally are not able to. Or if HR is just not doing the right thing. The answer is find someone that you trust to go to for support. And hopefully that person is inside your organization. And if they are not, find me or someone on LinkedIn who cares about people, whether you're part of the headcount I get paid to support or not, and get the resources and the support you need um to get past whatever difficult period you have, to hold someone accountable who's not respecting you or your space or your temple. If you're being taken advantage of and being asked to do more, but like, whatever it is, time actually doesn't heal all wounds. So you have to do something. And I think there are a lot of resources out there now, hopefully for people to find.
This is so good. I've got a friend who's going through all this exactly, and unfortunately, the company they're at doesn't have an HR department. And it's a very leadership at the top is also the HR is also everything, and so it's
Mhm.
like where would they go? Who do they talk to if there's no checks and balances?
Yeah, so here's the hard truth. In a dynamic like that, which sounds like a smaller operation where all of the probably operational functions are in one position or in one place, and that place is in leadership, then you have to ask yourself, you know, would you buy a car that's not working? You know? Because in a setup like that, even if the person escalates the issue based on the structure you described, what are the chances
Mhm.
that change is possible? And that sounds like really dire and unhelpful, but we also have to like know when to hold them and know when to fold them.
Mm.
And I think that we all have, and so that's a very personal decision, right? I'm not suggesting that please like do not quit your job and then send me notes. That's not suggesting.
I'm gonna go let them listen to this episode. Be like, listen to this. Get out of
Please,
there.
I don't want anyone's husband calling me and being like, "Why did you tell?" Or anyone's wife saying, "Why did you tell my husband to quit their job?" That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is like we all have like our personal level of our that line
Yes.
of um what it is we are willing to accept, right? And it could be for financial reasons, the what we need to take care of our family. It could be based on commitments we made for ourselves about what we will not accept. It could be, connected to our faith, like whatever informs your values and boundaries. You always want to make sure that you're showing up to a workplace that at least cares about you and your safety. And if you're not, then you really need to examine um the cost of staying, right? Which we never talk about. Um, what that puts on our families.
Oh yeah, because it
Um,
carries over. It's like all the drama at work can carry over to the personal, even though you want the personal to be disconnected when we're at work. So the company gets it all. The company gets every bit of your soul for the dollar.
Yeah. 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 And that's why if you don't know who you are going in,
Mm,
you're probably not going to like who you are coming out.
mm. Say that again. Say that again. It's good.
If you don't know who you are going in, you're not going to like who you are when you're coming out.
Mm, it's gold.
You're
And
not
that's like
between
that
you.
that comes from a place of deep like personal reflection.
Mhm.
No, this is gold. This is, and I'm gonna just throw this out there, and then it comes ties to a question. So I'm reading this book, American Icon, which is about Alan Mulally, who came in and saved Ford back in
Mm,
2006. He turned the company around. He came into a culture where it was you don't talk about your mistakes. Everybody puts up a front. There's no humanity in there. He comes in there, grins and hugs, and how are the kids? And these Michigan tough people didn't know how to respond to that.
hmm
And so it came from the top down because he was waiting for that humanity to be restored before he could turn the company around. And it took months and months and bickering and VPs wanting to quit. But ultimately, somebody was like, hey, you know what? I'm probably going to get fired anyways. Let me show my humanity. And he opened up to the shortcomings in his department and he didn't get fired. But that allowed Mulally to then see, like, okay, what you can identify, we can now fix. And I think, and this is what boggles me, and what I wanted to ask you. This was in 2006 when Mulally came in, fixed it, brought the humanity back. But you would figure other CEOs would see this and be like, "Hey, look, that worked for the Ford turnaround of the century. Let's implement it here instead of the same toxic culture that continues to perpetuate, and it just never changes." Is it a
It
decision
I
people
think it
just?
took a while to get this dysfunctional.
Mm,
Um and the one thing we actually don't talk enough about is the fact that our attitudes about work actually happened before we ever got a job. Our attitudes about work started by what we saw our parents and
mm,
our aunts and uncles and our neighbors. Uh, their attitudes about work actually are our first introduction to what work was and work is. And I think we're talking about, generations of attitudes about the fact that work should be work and life should be life. And um and that there shouldn't be an intersection of those things or considerations of those things. um but the world is different, and we know through lots of data and evidence that young people want to work at organizations who are more than just good in their field and industry, but who care for and consider the world.
mm.
So, I don't know why it didn't stick in 2006, but organizations that are not meeting the moment are getting called out. Um, they are in the press. They are being called out on social media by their staff. And I think the strategic imperative to be better at these things, if it isn't clear now, um, then I do sometimes worry whether we'll ever meet the moment. Because there is really great evidence of companies who do this well, and what happens to companies who don't.
The day of reckoning will be upon them.
And there is no silver lining of 2020, but because we are now becoming more and more of a remote workforce, there is a higher degree of mobilization in the marketplace. So people who arrive at places who are and experience that place differently than what they were sold um could be gone in a minute. And so you can make the changes and become more human-centered and remember that people are victims of trauma. People are dealing with trauma right there while in your workplace. They're human. They are afraid of what is happening in this world. They're uncertain. And so be careful of the amount of change you are shepherding in the organization because there's just only so much people can take. Be gracious when you're correcting because even if it isn't your best, it might be someone's best. Um, when you ask people how they're doing, make sure it's not just a greeting, but a real question. Just be a human.
That should be our t-shirt. Just be human. I mean, it's simple, but no, this is so needed. I got so many people I want to send this to, and it's one thing I think that ties right into what you're saying. It's actually what I picked up in counseling, many years of counseling for myself, for my relationships,
Sure.
but it was called the SOS. Do you want to give sympathy or a solution? And from what it sounds like is a lot of HR people want to give the solution, let's fix it instead of the sympathy, the connection back to the human spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be really clear that I this is not a criticism of HR. I am part of HR and I'm not perfect myself, and it is an impossible job. It is my criticism is of and I'm actually not criticizing anyone. I think I'm saying that the imperative is for leaders. Um, and sometimes HR is part of that, and sometimes they are not, right? And so it's for leaders to model these things so that we normalize them and we create a system of acceptance that the way we communicate, the way we create spaces for feedback, the way we problem solve, the way we measure staff sentiment and action plan around the things that staff need from us that we're not doing, like that work has to be alive with rigor and cadence and consistency in order to create that kind of human-centered experience. And if that commitment and that consistency is not there, then you can have peaks, but you will then have valleys. And when you try again after you've peaked, you'll never get as far as you did the first time. So, so yeah, just do the work and be human and listen and also, you know, I just had a conversation yesterday. I told someone, I said, people actually don't just want answers. It's totally okay to say, here's what we know and here's what we don't know. And we appreciate that you've asked these questions, and we're going to find the right people to get the right answers or where to come back to you. Um, you know, if people are imploding, you know, like don't have a holiday party and have people sing holiday songs when when things are just really about to explode, like uh, acknowledge when things are in peril and ask for grace and reset and just do something. And I've said before, like hope is not a strategy. Time does not heal all wounds. These things are important, and important things require care, and they require commitment, and they require execution. And I think I came here to say, it's 2026, and it's an opportunity for us to really like reflect on how we can do these things better. so that we don't have to keep having the conversation that we could have learned in 2006 from Detroit.
This is
Exactly.
like good marriage advice too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
earlier, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
No, this is so good.
Um, Colin, you said something that kind of hit home because I work for two companies, and when you were talking about leadership, this should start from leadership. It made so much sense because I resonated with what you were saying because I had one, and when one company, the leadership, the CEO, completely um detached from his emotions, very cold. I don't want to say cold, but just a more of a matter of fact kind of guy, numbers, statistics, data, and not having that human element, human compassion and empathy. While another company that I work for, CEO complete opposite. And the culture was different. Two different cultures. One was really the people were really happy because it started from the top and it worked its way down. And I saw that in the two cultures. So when you were saying this, a question just kind of popped into my mind. What could this? I mean, because there are some CEOs that, how do you get to that point where you could be like this other CEO that shows empathy, that cares, that puts people ahead? And while this person's been what, 40, 50 years of their life doing this, and how do you shift that mindset?
you have to believe in its value. You either have it or you don't, in my view. And
Okay.
there are going to be some people who are going to disagree with what I just said. Now, I am not suggesting that people cannot be redeemed. I'm not suggesting that people don't change. I'm not suggesting that with coaching and a made up mind, that someone can't turn into being more of an engaging, empathetic leader. What I'm saying is that the reason you're an empathetic leader is a value. And if you don't see the value, then you're not going to exhibit the behavior.
Mm,
And so the first CEO can hope, the best we can hope for in that scenario is that maybe he doesn't have the muscle, but he sees the value. And therefore there's a EVP or a COO or a CFO that has it. And the balance of being, really data driven and measurement focused and execution inspired with the person who maybe is a little bit more engaging and empathetic and transparent, then you've got a real strong tandem and balance there. The worst case scenario is you have a leader who doesn't believe in those values and how that connects with the culture that you saw in the second organization. That's not an accident. I just want to like knock on the screens. Like, there's a reason that relationships were valued and people were more collaborative in that second space. It's because it was modeled.
mm,
The worst case scenario for the first organization, Diana, and this is another thing that keeps me up at night, is you have a CEO who is detached and doesn't care or invest in staff sentiment. And then you have a lower tier of leaders who see the value of being engaging and empathetic and human centered, but because the leader doesn't model it, they stop doing it.
mm,
And then they shift into that model of leadership. And so we've now replicated or deferred the right kind of value-based leadership that we want to spread. And so um then we have to talk about boards and who holds a person at the top accountable when they're in control um and when are we going to start measuring these bonuses that people got for leading these big companies for more than returns and for things like DEI representation at the top levels of the organization and how well those organizations have reinvested in the communities where their employees live and work. Like, when are those things going to be important um, so that we're attracting leaders who have proven and demonstrated these skills before, and we're not just putting people at the top who can make us more money. But
That's the name
you
of the
know,
game.
you get what you
Money
pay
for
for.
money. Yeah. Wow. And I'll even say for our listeners out there, and this is always my side catch to this, this even goes
You
with the churches because it's the same structure. The leader at the top, nobody can question, it's their way or the highway. And so then that toxic environment develops. So it's like there needs to be the accountability, and something you just said about the lower or middle management, they can lead with empathy, but if it's not coming from the top, they may just stop. And I think that does happen. They just give up because you're kicking against the goads, as they would say. You're trying to make
yeah.
change, but it doesn't happen because the top's
And
not listening.
I've been really well behaved, so I'm gonna get myself in a little bit of trouble just
Do it.
because I'm
Mm.
going to. But when I was an intern, in the late 90s, early 2000s, um, Target was a employer that had huge leadership development programs for gifted and talented young people of color. Um, Huge DEI supplier programs and other things. Great, investment in community development. And part of their employer brand was sort of connected to that kind of thinking and that kind of sort of corporate citizenship. And their focus on those things have evolved, as has the world, and they're not the only company. I'm not picking on them, but that evolution is connected to changes in leadership, right? And so if we have leaders but we don't have systems, then these really good things that we've implemented and we've put in place, they don't stay after the leader goes. And then we're reinventing, new things when the thing that actually was the right thing probably didn't need to be reimagined, right? And so that's why that's another right challenge on why some of these culture-based things have not worked, is because they're tied to people. They were not entrenched and immersed as systems. And so um I think I think it's been fascinating to see how over the years that in that one organization that it's had many different reformations. Um and my suggestion is that that's a systems problem. Right? That's not a leadership problem. No, excuse me. That's a leadership and a systems problem.
We'll have a moment of silence for Target. Okay.
No offense, just calling it like I see it.
Oh no, I mean it's apparent. I mean it's apparent what's happened with their stock, everything. It's a system and leadership could save it. Ooh.
So Colin, for someone that's listening, let's say, let's dress like, let's say, a leader right now in an organization. And if you had something that you wanted to directly say something to them to change that, they recognize that they're not that empathetic leader, or what would you like to say to them and how they can begin their journey, their process in changing?
Start small. Um, Start small. I think the word change is a big word for people. It carries a lot of I don't want to keep calling them traumas. We can call them, if we want more aspiration, let's call them flashbacks. But we say change, we remember transitions, we remember pivots, we remember implementations, we remember system migrations, things that are not pleasant. And the thing about change is it can still be beautiful. Right? It can still be positive. It can still be exciting and aspirational. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to transform our lives. It just has to start from this small idea that something isn't working, or something could work better, or something needs to stop, or something needs to happen, whatever the something is. Um, Change can be beautiful. Start small.
Hmm.
Find an accountability partner. Someone who isn't afraid to tell you the truth. Um, Mark your wins. Because sometimes we falter, and we don't want the one faltering to outweigh all of the good progress we made, right? So mark your wins. Um, Acknowledge your failures. Don't let them overpower you, but acknowledge them. But yeah, just do something. Um, and and you may fall, you may fail, but the activity of being unstuck is is the pathway to getting to the next place. There's no way to get to the next place without unsticking yourself. And so it has to happen sometime. Start small. And when I say start small, it doesn't have to be the thing. Um, Start small and changing something else, and the confidence from the success from that can help you tackle the bigger things.
It's like the snowball effect. Little,
Yes.
big, big. Yep.
Yeah. And the more you do it, the less scary it becomes. I have not mastered it. Um, but I have changed enough things that I know it to be true, at least from my experience.
And I think that's the big thing right there is that you're aware. And if more CEOs would be aware, even that itself would be revolutionary.
Yeah. And I think it's a lifelong journey because we're always changing.
Hmm.
But the key point is being tapped into being aware, as Patrick said. The moment that you are aware and you start working on it, for me personally, I think it's a lifelong journey that we are constantly doing because we grow through our different experiences. Um,
And we fail.
exactly. Exactly.
And um and failures like has to be the start of the conversation, not the end of it, right? Or else that's where we leave it. And I think that there's just, as long as we've got breath, there's another chapter.
That's so good. Failure has to be, well, I'll say it again. Failure has to be where we start, not where we
It's the
finish.
start of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the end.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
It happens. Like we all, something gets screwed up and we screw up, and I'm not suggesting it's okay. Um, whatever it happens to be, but I'm telling you it happens. It's the one, other than, having blood pumping through our brain, our veins, and and the other human characteristics that make us all human, that the one of the other connectors is that, we don't always win. We don't always get the job. We don't always salvage the relationship. Um, we don't always, get it right. We don't always say the right thing. We don't always respond the right way. But I think it's how we reflect, how we atone, how we self-correct, how we reset, and how we move forward that I think really matters. And workplaces need to make sure that there's grace, for that kind of space, because they're not perfect either, as it turns out.
yeah. I mean, it transcends work. It's the human experience.
Yeah.
It's there is no perfection.
There there is. Um, Colin, if from our listeners, if someone, our leaders, listeners, if someone wanted to reach out to you, how can they find you? Like your website, LinkedIn, social media, like can you kind of give us that information where they can find you? Because I mean, you're the guy to go to.
This is
Oh,
good.
that's nice of you to say. I am very active on LinkedIn. So Colin H. Mincy. Um, it's LinkedIn .com um dash in dash Colin Houston Mincy is the link, but Colin H. Mincy, if you search for me, you'll find me. Um, I am I have been writing a book, so I am I'm about 75% done. So hoping to by November of this year to have that out. And so
Oh, that'll be
looking
great.
forward to that and think some of what we talked about will be part of that. And it'll it's part of that pain changed my game um you know discussion point that we had today, and mostly online I'm talking about just solutions and giving ourselves grace and tools that I'm finding to help me manage life and work and those kinds of things. It's yeah, it's a space for honesty.
Love that. So you're going to be back on the show to promote your book, right? Because you're part of the familia now. So
If you call, I will answer. And I do mean that. Yeah.
Call it life, work, and in between. It's right there. Get it all.
Literally, right?
Yeah.
Literally, and personified.
I mean, this is good from a corporate HR perspective, but also just in life. I mean, everything you're talking about, the accountability, the starting at the point of failure. This is just good for entrepreneurs, startups, humans, reconnecting the soul. So very good
People.
stuff. Yeah, people.
Yeah.
it resonates with everyone. So you can use any of the suggestions, any of the stuff that you mentioned, apply it into our life in any way. I love that. That's great wisdom. So I know that we're getting close up to at time. I wanted to ask you, what's one message if you wanted to leave our listeners who feel like they're just tired, and they try to, and everything that they've done. What message can you leave them?
I keep talking about this. I'm going to keep talking about it. If whether it is a to-do list for work, whether it is you figuring out how to manage all the kids' activities on the weekends when you need a nap, whether it's the big items and blockers that take real estate in your mind and heart that you can't move. There's something I do called do it, defer it, delegate it, delete it. Do it, defer it, delegate it, delete it. My coach, Jennifer Lowe, taught it to me years ago. And it allows me to compartmentalize the things that I actually absolutely need to get to. The things that I might be able to ask others for help with. The things that I don't really need to focus on right now, and I can put them in a box and open it another time. And the things that I can just cross off my list and say, you know what, it's just not going to happen. And it's a interesting way of managing your commitments and your time so that you've got intentional spaces for like self-care. And if it's reading, if it's taking a bath, if it's cleaning your house and like whatever it happens to be, do it, defer it, delegate it, delete it. Big monumental boulders, little small, you know, errand running to do list, whatever it happens to be. It's a system that I think a lot of people have started to try and I think have had success with.
I like it.
Great. I'm
40s.
going to start doing that. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
really
Mhm.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Jen. Yes. Patrick, did you have any final questions that you would like to ask Colin before we begin to wrap it up?
No, I'm letting everything simmer. Like I should have been taking notes on this. I mean, this is so helpful, so good. Uh, yeah. Well, when you come back for the book, we'll
Yes,
we'll dig in more because
I'd
there's.
love that.
I would like to actually give it out to our listeners, their questions, because I have my friends that will be like, hey, we have this guest. What questions do you have? Because they're everything you're talking through, they're going through it right now. I mean, to a T, like you read their mail.
I understand. I understand.
And
It's
if
real
only more
life.
people would
Yeah,
understand, that's what we need in this world.
yeah, real life.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for having me and for this platform. And yeah, I've enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much, Colin, for
Yes.
being a part of this podcast. You're now part of La Familia, like I said. We would love to have you anytime back. Anything that inspires you that you think that the community, the nation, the world needs to hear, please reach out. We would love
Yeah,
to
I
have
will.
you on. We can continue the conversation. And for our wonderful listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to Life and In Between podcast. We love you. And I'm going to hand it over, like always, to Patrick on where they can find us if they haven't
Don't forget,
subscribed.
tell all your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your HR, tell your CEO, tell your CEO's mistress. Ooh, we went
Uh-oh.
there.
Not, oh
We
Lord.
went there.
Not a Coldplay
Tell
joke.
tell them all. They can find us Life and In Between podcasts on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be there and we'll be waiting for you. This is great. See y'all next time. Peace.
Peace. Thank you.